Our focus at Niantic Spatial is we want to build physical AI that understands the world. We do this by developing what we call a large geospatial model.
And that was Asim Ahmed, a multi-award winning game developer and head of product marketing at Niantic Spatial, the company behind one of the most advanced geospatial AI models in the world. Before that, he had launched Pokemon Go to more than 1 billion users and worked on Peridot across mobile mixed reality and AR glasses with partners like Meta and Snap. But how do you even build a geospatial model?
The first aspect of it is what we call reconstruction, and this is our ability to create really high fidelity 3D digital twins of large areas of the world. Ideally, over time, we'll have mapped the entirety of the world to the majority of the world.
Then we go into real-world verticals, entertainment, large venues, public sector operations, and robotics.
This is the ability to give machines, whether it's wearable devices such as augmented reality glasses or devices like robotics, the ability to understand where they are in space. It's a centimeter level accuracy.
We also talk Peridot not as a game, but as a testbed for embodied AI.
Peridot, it sees a flower, it knows, hey, that's a flower, maybe I'm going to go up and sniff it.
And finally, Asim shares a vision where finally technology helps us connect and stay present.
This computer that we got to keep in our pocket started to really distract us from the world. My ultimate hope is that whether it's digital content that's layered onto the world or whether it's a physical machine that's a companion navigating alongside me in the world, is that it brings me closer to the world that I'm in.
But before we get into it, I wanted to remind you that if you don't have the time to watch the full interview and want to learn from other founders and creatives at the intersection between XR and AI, you should definitely check out the XR AI Spotlight newsletter. By subscribing, you will get weekly interviews like this directly in your inbox and access to a list of tools and apps that allow you to experience Gaussian splatting in VR, on Quest, and Vision Pro. Just check the first link in the show description. And now it's time to roll the title of Welcome Asim under the spotlight. Asim, it is a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Asim, last March, Niantic split to have a distinct focus on geospatial AI and games. What is Niantic Spatial current mission?
Yeah, I think if you've been following the Niantic Spatial or the Niantic journey over the past several years, we really had two core aspects of the business that became a priority. We had a really well-performing games business that was performing well with products like Pokemon Go, Monster Hunter Now, Pikmin Bloom. But we also had this amazing, powerful platform for geospatial technology, as well as augmented reality technology. And we made the decision earlier this year to split the company by selling off the games division to Scopely, which really gave the games kind of their best opportunity to succeed, but also give our geospatial technology the best opportunity to succeed as its own kind of standalone entity, its own standalone business. And so really our focus at Niantic Spatial is we want to build physical AI that understands the world. And we do this by developing what we call a large geospatial model. And it's really the intention is to give machines, in the same way that humans have the ability to understand the world, we want to give machines the ability to understand, interact, and navigate in the world. And so what we're doing is we're building this large geospatial model, which is basically, I like to think of it as if you have large language models that understand text and language, we call those, book smarts. The large geospatial model is really to understand the physical world. So we give AI street smarts.
So I think that there are two ways to continue the conversation. One is like, what does it take really to for a computer to understand the world? And the other is probably, when that happens, then what does it unlock? So maybe we can start with the first side, right? So what does it take for a computer to, let's say, really understand the world around us?
Yeah, so part of our large geospatial model includes three core capabilities. And really, these are the foundation of what gives machines the ability to understand the real world. And so the first aspect of it is what we call reconstruct or reconstruction. And this is our ability to create these really high fidelity 3D digital twins of large areas of the world. And ideally, over time, we'll have mapped the entirety of the world or the majority of the world. Um, and we do this by collecting 3D data. And this comes from a number of sources. In some of our previous games, we have scan data that is collected from them. We also have Scaniverse, which is a separate application, and that allows people to go around the world and not only scan objects but also scan larger spaces. And then we can also couple that with other forms of 3D data, whether it's aerial data from drones or satellites and beyond. And so the compilation of all of this 3D data can help us build this really rich digital twin of the world. And that can enable a variety of applications on top of that. The second capability that's part of this large geospatial model is what we call localize or localization. And this is the ability to give machines, whether it's wearable devices such as augmented reality glasses or devices like robotics, the ability to understand where they are in space and orient where they are in space to centimeter level accuracy. Um, and similarly, this can enable a variety of different types of applications. But really, it's this ability to give the machine the ability to understand where it is relative to where you are and where it is relative to the space around it. And so this can enable things like multiplayer augmented reality opportunities, as well as annotating the world with very specific, augmented reality overlays that make sense within the context of, whatever that use case might be, all the way to giving robotics the ability to navigate throughout the world because it understands where it is relative to space. And then the last component that is part of our large geospatial model is understand or understanding. And this is our semantic understanding of the world. So we have this per pixel ability to understand what any pixel is in space in the world. And so this enables us to basically have like a queryable world that we can ask questions to. So an example could be like, which structures around me would be able to provide shade or shelter? And that can also be applicable in a number of different ways.
So regarding this geospatial model, right? I mean, I think people are familiar, for example, when they hold a phone and maybe there's a QR code or something like an anchor that creates augmented reality on top or relative to that. Then now people are also, I think, to some extent familiar to visual positioning system, right? Where let's say you have like a larger area, right? Maybe like a landmark that acts as this anchor for let's say, in this case, we are talking about augmented reality. We could talk augmented reality experience. Now, how is this large geospatial model different from the visual positioning system? Is it sort of like an evolution? Can you maybe explain what more it is than just a standard visual positioning system?
Yeah, so the visual positioning system is really what we include in that localized layer of the large geospatial model. So it is a capability of the large geospatial model. What really is added on top of that to this large geospatial model is those two other services. But this kind of promise of this large geospatial model is that with, I'd say, like more noisy or less perfect scans or photos of space, that over time we'll be able to create much more accurate representations of the world with again, that limited or imperfect set of data. And we do this because we have over years and years of collection of these scanned locations around the world, a really good understanding of what the world looks like. And so we can basically interpolate or understand to a fairly high degree of accuracy with a limited set of data, what that world might look like. So for example, if you have the front side of a church and maybe it's not the most perfect scan, you can probably assume based on hundreds of thousands or millions of other churches in the world that we have scans of what that church can or might look like to a fair degree of accuracy. And so the real idea here, the real promise is being able to kind of essentially supercharge that map of the world over time, based on this rich understanding of the world.
So when we think about the, let's say, the verticals that are, let's say, leveraging this type of technology, what kind of verticals are we talking about? Can you maybe share with us some examples?
Yeah, there are a number of examples of verticals that can span all the way from logistics to in some cases the public sector, to robotics, to specific like large venues that might want to enable wayfinding. And so I guess to like break it down at a high level, like I'll start with the immersive entertainment layer because I think a lot of people will be familiar with that. We've announced two partnerships since this kind of split into what Niantic Spatial currently is. And the first one we announced is a partnership with Meowwolf. And what their goal really is to do is they want to bring their Meowwolf universe everywhere around the world. And so they're using our technology as a way to kind of bring that layer of what makes Meowwolf location so special to anyone, anywhere they are. But one of the things that they also want to do is they want to leverage our visual positioning system to help encourage more people that are outside of these Meowwolf locations to actually come and visit a Meowwolf location in person and have a more immersive experience through this additional layer of technology while they're at that location. Just a little bit of how do we bring our world everywhere, but how do we also bring people from everywhere into our world, at these very specific, locations. And so, part of that pilot is an opportunity where we're exploring at a Meowwolf location in Denver. The second layer of kind of that immersive entertainment is a partnership we announced with Kojima Productions. I believe it was in September. And we can't share too many details about that at this moment in time. But really, if you look at Hideo Kojima and his work over time, he's this really amazing storyteller. And what they're looking to do with our technology is really bring to life or redefine immersive storytelling in the real world. And so there's this whole immersive entertainment layer that I think is so exciting. But our technology can really be applied in so many ways beyond that. And I think a couple examples I'll just quickly bring up. We announced a partnership with Echelon Technology a couple months ago. And, what they're looking to do is they're looking to bring the Niantic visual positioning and reconstruction data accompanied with, some of their data to really enhance the ability for, in this case, U.S. Coast Guard training, for safety operations or rescue training. And so that's one area where they're using our digital twin technology to really enhance that level of kind of preparation and simulation for training. But there are other industries. So for example, oil and gas, you could leverage our 3D models of, these locations, these plants for site inspection and maintenance over time. And so if you have this really good, accurate understanding of what the plant looks like, and then over time you're collecting continuous drone data on it, you can start to spot problems earlier on before they arise. And so, whether it's damaged equipment or overgrown vegetation, that's kind of one exciting area where that technology can be applied. All the way to insurance and surveying. So inspectors, as they're going through a space can, with augmented reality, mark hazards or, points directly so that someone else later, has this understanding of this previous inspection that took place. And so a variety of applications that can be had with our technology.
So, and okay, bear with me, right? So I'm not a technical person. You are not a technical person. And there are a lot of people listening, I think, that also might not be technical. And one question is at a very high level still, like what are these companies getting? Are those like point clouds? Are those like SDKs? Are those like, so how does this integration of this technology kind of like happen within, let's say you mentioned like surveying, right? Or you mentioned about like a location based experience that uses augmented reality. Is that like an SDK? Like at the simplest level possible, how does this look like?
Yeah, so we have an SDK of our technology, specifically for our augmented reality set of technology. But we can also provide kind of this mapping layer of the world. And in some of these kind of early on, because we are only a company that is, 4 or 5 months old, in some of these early on applications, we're working directly with a lot of these partners, kind of part and parcel with them to enable some of these experiences. And so whether it's directly with them, building these applications that enable efficiency and, again, whatever aspect of the world that they're looking to support, we're working directly with many of these customers.
So then let's say that one of the important thing is of course the coverage. And I think when we think about coverage of these locations, we shouldn't think necessarily, okay, we want 100% coverage of the world, because sometimes, for example, the density of the coverage, right, the accuracy in certain spots might be way more important than having every empty spot on Earth mapped in 3D, right, in a way. So how do you kind of like expand these data sets? And you mentioned, of course, like example like Scaniverse, where people keep scanning. I'm one of the contributor, by the way. And but you also mentioned satellite data. So overall, right, how do you increase the coverage of what are the, let's say, relevant location, maybe, because that's also another point, right? What are the places where you feel that there is the need of more coverage, and when that's the case, how do you kind of like tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of ways. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have this really rich understanding of scans of places. And we have over 1 million VPS locations that have already been enabled, and many more that can come online. And so we will continue to have this pipeline of 3D data that we're continuing to collect, whether it's, again, from these other sources, whether it's from Scaniverse, or whether it's from collaborating directly with partners. And so we announced a Snap partnership actually in June. And part of that is the hope is we can enable Snapchatters, hundreds of millions of Snapchatters around the world, to continue to contribute and help build this kind of AI map of the world. And so that's one way where we're going to continue to enable this ground truth data to support this geospatial model. In addition to that, we're able to collect other forms of 3D data, whether it's terrain data, whether it's drone data, satellite data, as I mentioned earlier. But the real hope and the promise, as I mentioned, is this large geospatial model that can hopefully over time help us continue to supercharge and massively accelerate the accuracy of this third generation map of the world over time and with time. And so that promise is that it can, again, take that noise or data and regularize it so that we have a greater understanding of that real world location.
So Niantic, back in the days when it was still Niantic, right, work on all these different pieces, right? Pokemon Go, we mentioned Scaniverse, of course, Peridot as well, that is still actively being worked on, some of which I believe you are very much involved in. So, and I want to know more about it. But the question before we move into that was like, these are all different pieces, right? It feels from an outsider.
Sure.
Now, how do these pieces like fit into each other and complement? Maybe not all do, right? Because that could also be like an experiment on a side, but just at a high level, how are these different pieces complementing and being part of this underlying technology that now Niantic Spatial is pushing onto the market?
Yeah, so ultimately, at the end of the day, they all contribute to this larger mission, this larger vision, this larger, bigger strategy, which is this large geospatial model. But it's really this physical AI, this understanding of the real world And we really want to enable technology to have this true understanding. And so experiences like Scaniverse contribute to the reconstruct layer, the VPS and applications of the VPS have that layer of localization, that layer of understanding where a machine is relative to space. And then some of these more, flagship experiences like Peridot or even Ingress, they contribute by helping us continue to, think of them as like test beds, or this ability to continue to show the promise of different applications of what our technology can serve for. And, I'm sure we'll get into the discussion about Peridot specifically. You'll really start to see all of those different layers come together and show what that promise of what is an AI that has the street smarts, that is not just book smart, but has this understanding of the real world, physical reality around us. And that's very different than I think some of these other, players in the space that are building world foundation models, where they're really thinking about bringing, again, maybe some of this mapping data or some of this real world understanding, but really focused on more simulated environments. We really care about this AI that has this true understanding of the world around us, this true accurate detail.
I think you point out a very important thing indeed. I think that large world models is more about the synthesis of a world that could be like a game, could be a test bed for robots or autonomous driving, while instead in your case it does feel like, okay, I am on this real place on Earth. What is this around me, and how does this make sense? And then how I can, for example, augment on top of it potentially, right, in a way that it is also it makes sense because it has a semantic understanding of where I am. It's not just about the mesh that surrounds me.
Yeah, I think that it's like really interesting point you bring, and you think about it in two layers. There's this like geotypical understanding of space, and some of these world foundation models are really curious about like this general understanding of the real world, or for a simulated environment. And so the types of questions you think about is like, what is a park, or what is a bench? What is a building? Like that's what a geotypical understanding of the world is. We're really focused on this geospecific understanding of the world. And so this is a reflection of reality to as much, exact detail as possible. And so that is the opportunity for the machine to say like, I am at the cross section of this street, and I am oriented facing northeast. And you can start to understand when you have that greater level of detail, the types of applications that it can solve for, versus just knowing like, this is what a park is, this is what a park looks like, or this is what a bench is.
As well as the type of data that needs to be fed into the system in order to develop that understanding, right? Because at that point, you can easily imagine, okay, now we're talking about, for example, traffic data. Or maybe we're talking about like air quality data, or maybe all sorts of like other layers that go just beyond about where that's positioned, but then creates that, let's say, deeper understanding. But I do want to talk about Peridot because I still have a question. So you need to explain me what it is, in a sense that, is it a game? Is it a toy? Is it a brand? Is it an embodied AI? What is Peridot?
Peridot can be whatever you want it.
No, that's the worst answer you could give me.
Peridot has had this long journey over the years, and I was fortunate enough to join the team very early on in the experience. And so like at the core level, what it has become, I like to think of it as this multi-platform media franchise that really enables us to push the boundaries of technology. And really it's like a test bed for innovation. So like, what is Peridot? Peridot is a team that is enabling these experiences. And we started with a mobile game that really, at the time, you look at some of the other Niantic games like Pokemon Go or Pikmin Bloom, and you're an avatar on a map. And as you move in the real world, you move on the map. We wanted to kind of take this understanding what kind of Niantic game look like and turn that on its head. And so we really said, like, what if we immerse you directly into the real world? Everything you see is through this camera understanding of what the world looks like. And then we give you this deeper understanding of what the world is. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this is this physical AI that understands the world, we're able to leverage real-time mapping to have these virtual creatures be able to navigate authentically through the world in ways that make sense, to jump on tables, to jump on benches, to jump off of benches. They can have this physical interaction with the world. We layer semantic understanding into that into our experience. And so if you're near a beach, you can have specific experiences or collection of foraging for food that you can only find at a beach because you're digging in the sand versus whether you're looking at water. And so now you're bringing this real world understanding in. And then we have like occlusion. So again, another way that the creature can authentically and naturally navigate and understand the world around it. And over time, the mobile experience had expanded to bring in other layers of AI. So we bring in large language models, and one of the features within that Peridot experience is that you can take this understanding of what the world looks like, the semantic understanding of what the world looks like, and you can feed that into an LLM brain for the creature, and we have this really vast animation library. And so, for example, an application of what this could actually look like is that if a Peridot, it sees a flower, it knows, hey, that's a flower. Maybe I'm going to go up and sniff it because I should sniff a flower. Flowers smell beautiful. And then I'll maybe wiggle my butt and sit back. And so, the mobile experience is, at the time, what we thought could really push the boundary of the technology. But even when we were just this like concept on paper, again, when I joined, the vision was to always build for the future of where technology is heading. And the ideal case or the dream case for many of us is true augmented outdoor reality glasses. And we get there, I think, in incremental phases. And so that next evolution of the Peridot franchise and where we expanded to was HMDs, and more specifically for indoor use cases or the indoor environment. And so with the Meta Quest 3 device and the Apple Vision Pro, both of those enabled this really true color pass-through sense of the world, but also this really crisp hand fidelity. And so now you can really be immersed in your world, in your environment, and be able to interact with these creatures in new ways that you can't do when you're like on a mobile device, when you're on a phone. And so, I think of the phone as like this like little window into this entertainment world. With a mixed reality headset, you're like actually immersed. You can go and pick up this digital creature. You can play with it. You can engage with it. And so over time, we had evolved the experience that we launched on the Meta Quest and Apple Vision Pro. And then the like ultimate, early glimpse into that true outdoor glasses future was a partnership with Snap, which we announced in 2024. And we shipped an experience called Peridot Beyond, which is like what I'd like to think of like the first glimpse of what a really immersive, exciting entertainment experience can be on those true outdoor glasses. And time will still be needed, to get those glasses to a place where you can use them all day long in an outdoor environment. They have the performance capabilities that can really run a robust, comprehensive experience. But Peridot on that experience is this early glimpse of like how might spatial game design look in an outside world. We have a limited field of view, so how do we work within those constraints to enable an experience that feels compelling and exciting? And over time, ideally, we can build towards that ultimate experience. And what I'd like to ultimately think of Peridot as is it's this kind of like ambient creature that is there with you when you want it, might, bring delights in the moments that you need delight, but isn't this like game that you're always playing at every moment of the cycle.
This is one of the questions that I had, in a sense, like about Peridot. Is it something that is leaning more towards the entertainment or more towards the utility? Because sometimes I think that trying to do everything in the same way, right, have it more like a game, it's good in its own. But when you try also to be useful, then you might not do your best as, let's say, making a game out of it. So where do you think it's the future, or let's say this new implementation of Peridot leaning towards?
Yeah, so I'd say like we still have roots in the game world and gamification, right? And you can bring delight to the world, but to your point, like it doesn't actually have to be a game. And if you try to do too much all at once, you'll almost like have this really confusing experience to some degree. So one application that we think is really exciting, and it's really in a demo format right now, is what we're calling Project Jade. And like I'm thinking of this as like a glimpse of like true embodied AI in a digital creature. And we showed a glimpse of this one at Augmented World Expo earlier in the year, where we bring on a VPS location and this creature has a really good understanding of what that VPS location is. And you can interact and have a conversation with the creature and it can tell you interesting facts or history about that location. But last month at the Snap Lens Fest, we showed a further evolution of that. And again, what I'm calling is like true embodied AI. And so we're basically giving AI senses that humans have. And so with augmented reality, we give it the sense of sight. So it can understand where it is in space, what it's looking at. With our VPS technology on top of that, now it has a sense of place. So again, to what I was mentioning earlier, it knows where it is in the world with centimeter level precision. Then we can layer in a really comprehensive, what we're calling an AI brain, but a multimodal LLM that can be a knowledge base for facts and history and understanding and memory. And now you add this fourth layer of conversational AI. And so now this creature has the sight, it has the understanding of space, it has the brain to be able to interact and retain knowledge in space, and now has this really empathetic voice that it can now interact back and forth with you as. And so, an example of what that looks like at Snap's Lens Fest is very utilitarian to your question earlier, where I can be at one specific part of this location and I can say, "Hey Dot, where's a good place, to find food at this location?" And Dot can navigate me to the kitchen in the Snap offices because it knows where the kitchen is, knows that the kitchen has food, and it is now providing this very utilitarian purpose. But I'd like to, like, over time, ultimately hope that there are these extra moments of delight that can be layered into it. So it is not just purely this utility experience, but it is this like truly exciting companion that again understands space, that wants to make you feel more immersed in the world and less distracted from the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially we are seeing now all this way we interact with these augmented AR glasses, right? Where there is this voice or entity. And I think it just makes sense, especially when you are outdoor, you are in the world, somehow that entity to be part of the world and accompany you, right? So, and I think that at this moment, there is still these technological boundaries, right, where we just cannot pass, and that has to do with glasses, field of view, battery life, right? Again, because let's also be honest. But I think that's where things could potentially move when you want to, right? Because that's also the other important thing. Sometimes I might not want to have an embodied AI in any form in my space. Maybe I just want an audio feed telling me or answering my question, maybe, right? One thing, though, that I'm curious is more for your personal perspective, in a sense. Like you mentioned Peridot being on Meta, Quest, Apple Vision Pro, Snap Spectacles. How it is to work on a product that is pushed with these, let's say, huge companies, right, that have their own also priorities, agenda, and they also want to look good, right, in a way, and their own platform. How does it feel as someone being in the weeds of deploying a product like this?
It's so fun, and part of the reason, and I think my evolution at Niantic over the many years has aligned with this is moving beyond just games into this really innovative world and really pushing the boundaries of these technologies, and we get to work with these very exciting partners, as you mentioned, Meta, Apple, to bring the experienced Apple Vision Pro, with Snap as true partners. And we want to all make each other look good, but at the end of the day, we want to inspire creativity. And I think like that is the most exciting part of working on an experience like, Peridot, and trying to think of like how can we totally like reimagine what entertainment can look like when layered on top of the real world. And so like what I hope is that someone can look at Peridot and the many manifestations that it comes in, all across these devices, and be inspired to look at whatever they're trying to build and really push the boundaries of what the technology, what's capable with the technology at the moment in time. Because I think in a couple years, when we actually have a true AR glasses form factor that you can wear all day, that you can wear outside, like we will dream to have these really amazing experiences. And my lens is like, again, how do we do this in a way that uh, brings people into the world, doesn't distract them from the world. And so be inspired to push the boundaries, but also realize the moments where um, the technology can almost fade into the background. And so like that is what has been the most exciting thing about working with these partners, because we're all thinking towards that same vision.
You started mentioning vision, right? And of course, I wonder at this point, like the moment that the spatial intelligence, right, becomes accessible, right, a bit like a vision model or a bit like a language model becomes
Maybe.
accessible. Uh, what kind of experience do you think will develop? And I'm not just talking about XR experiences, right? I'm really talking at this point more about products and solutions. It could be certainly on the business side, right? Or it could be something that is for consumers. Do you have thoughts for the two of them?
Yeah, so I mentioned a handful of the business applications. And again, those are more specific, like enterprise customers that are thinking about, once we have this true understanding of physical reality, how can it make our operations more efficient, more safe, really depending on the use that is necessary for them. I think like one area that I'm most excited about is robotics. And I think that is, as you think about that is an industry that will come to life over time more and more and more. And we're seeing early versions of that right now. But these robots will need, these are our machines in the same way that glasses, AR glasses are machines. These robots will need to have a good understanding of the physical world, to be able to navigate the world, to be able to interact with the world. And I think you'll see a lot of robotics inspired companies right now that are really thinking about, how can I have this robot help me fold my clothes or maybe help me do my dishes? Really leveraging, more visual models like videos, to have an understanding of like what does folding clothes look like in many different environments. But that's not going to enable robots to actually move about our world, to actually understand where they are in the grand scheme of the world. And so I think that is an area beyond these variety of XR applications and beyond some of these um, business, enterprise applications that we'll see an industry start to boom. And the idea with our VPS technology is that it can also work in GPS denied areas or areas where maybe the GPS doesn't work as well. Because again, we have this ability to localize and understand space around it. And so now you can start to imagine the efficiency of robots being able to move and navigate throughout our world, even in areas where maybe the GPS might fail, because they do have that understanding of space. And you can think of the variety of ways where, like, maybe if you have robots that are doing some form of, let me take a package from point A to point B or deliver something from point A to point B, where in a lot of the cases right now, they might need some form of teleoperation. The efficiency of that understanding of the world can really help, boost that area.
So I think if we don't talk about, so some time ago there was this announcement from this company, right, who released, I don't know if you have seen it, this robot that was actually teleoperated, right? That you actually wear a headset and there is someone from a room on the other side teleoperates this robot. And I was wondering, like, because that's technically what we're talking about. We're talking about the future, but to some extent, a version of that future, it's already behind, around the corner. So, I mean, Do you have any thoughts, maybe just your personal opinion on that kind of like announcement and the kind of implication that it has for a company? Or maybe let's take that out of the way. Like for you, how did you feel about that specific announcement, or sharing that this might be closer than we think?
Robots are super exciting, and I'm like stoked to see the ways that they can be embedded in our world. Um, but it can also be scary that, like, from the form of teleoperation, it can, if I have a robot in my house all the time, it's seeing everything that I'm seeing. And I think, like, over time, the hope and the dream is that it doesn't need to be teleoperated at all. It has that true understanding of the world, the physical space around it. It has this understanding of the activities. And I think, like, that's the point at which I would be excited and be bringing that into my home and having it support me. Um, but I think, like, there's a lot of excitement, and, like, 2-3 years ago, I didn't even think robots were, like, around the corner in such a way that, like, now you're seeing almost every company thinking about how robots can enhance their operations, um, and in a more consumer way. Like, obviously, they've been, a thing in manufacturing and many other industries from, decades, but really as, like, a consumer application, as something that someone can go and just, buy, maybe in 2-3 years, and have as part of their day-to-day routine. Like, I'm excited, but I'm, like, optimistically cautious as well.
Yeah, I think if we have learned a lesson from XR, is also it always might take longer than what we think in a way. So
It's only
I
three
think,
years away.
yeah, exactly, right, as you say. So maybe the robots, it's not gonna be three. Maybe it's gonna be more to have it also something that is very truly useful, right? Because again, but I still think it's fascinating that there is something like this that is coming and people will have in their house. Does that mean that's gonna do the job or replace the human? I don't think so in any way, any moment closer than that. But still, it is like faster. It's evolving faster than what I would have thought.
Totally. And to that point, like, very similar to XR, I think you'll see incremental steps towards that ultimate vision. And so, while it may not be able to truly autonomously navigate everywhere right at this moment, you will start to see people really pushing the boundaries of what is possible. And I think you will see efficiencies along the way. And we will ultimately get there. And I think we'll ultimately get to that dream world that we all hope to see, and the way that we engage and interact with technology in our world. It'll take time.
So maybe just to conclude, right? I mean, I think that if you think as let's say at Niantic Spatial as a, let's say, a foundational um, model, or in a sense more like infrastructure to build and to deploy either digital content on the real world, or to help make sense of this real world, how do you think is the role of Niantic Spatial in this moving forward, in terms of the next 6 months, the next year? How are you navigating this evolving landscape?
I think, like, our ultimate goal, our ultimate vision is we want to make the world a useful place for us. And the way that we do that is by giving technology the same understanding of the world in the same way that humans can do it. And it's baby steps to get there. You'll see us experimenting right now, early experimentation of, something like Project Jade. We'll see how that can be applied to robotics. And so maybe you can have if you're visiting the Niantic Spatial office in the coming months, you could have a robot maybe greet you at the front desk and navigate you within the office. And so I think, again, everything is a building block towards that ultimate future that we're hoping towards. And you'll see us incrementally, what we're doing internally at Niantic, but also partners we're working with, start to see the way that the world becomes a tool for them versus just being a place that they're a part of. And I think that's the place that technology can become the most seamless part of our day to day. And I'll go back to something that I said before. Like, my ultimate hope or my ultimate vision is that whether it's digital content that's layered onto the world, or whether it's a physical machine that's a companion navigating alongside me in the world, is that it brings me closer to the world that I'm in. It doesn't distract me from the world. It makes my ability to live in the world a little bit more seamless, a little bit more engaging. And I think what you saw maybe 20 years ago with the initial kind of smartphone, this computer that we got to keep in our pocket, started to really distract us from the world in many different ways. It was also a marvelous device, and it has expanded a lot of industries in many ways. But can technology meet us back where we are, back in our real world with us, and be a seamless part with us? I think that our technology can help enable that, and I think it can be a foundation for making that a reality. And so, like, I'm excited to see what kind of can converge over time.
Asim, thank you very much for being with us.
Of course, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I love chatting with you.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you like the show, remember to leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlights on the greatest founders and makers, pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. Also, make sure to check out the show page xraispotlight.com, where you can find more conversation like this one. Till next time.